My name is Taylor. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, that's a long story, and I wasn't there for a lot of it, so I'm not really qualified to tell it. But I do know a couple of people who are. They happen to be my mom and dad.
I give advice all the time on how to begin stories. But faced with the daunting task of telling our story, a task given to us by Taylor herself, I have found it difficult to find those first words. Once upon a time, cliche. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Pretty accurate, actually, but it's taken. So here's the advice I give my students. Start where the action is. So here goes. It was a Saturday afternoon, winter, 1989. I walked the 5 blocks from my apartment in downtown New Haven to the Yale hockey rink. I was a senior. The sun was shining, but it was cold and windy, and I pulled my long black overcoat, a staple of the day for hockey players back then, tight around me and buried my chin in my scarf. My new shoes, shiny wingtips I had picked up in a thrift store, clicked on the sidewalk. I'd given up playing hockey to focus on lacrosse, but I missed the sport, and so had signed on as an assistant coach with the Yale women's team. That day, we were playing Dartmouth, and as I walked into the arena, I ran into the Dartmouth team that had just arrived. I stopped to speak with a high school friend of mine who played for them. I remember virtually nothing about that conversation, except that at one point we were interrupted by a couple of younger Dartmouth players who giggled their way through their remarks and who then disappeared back into the crowd. Full disclosure, I thought one of them was kind of cute.
My roommate, all you need to know about her was her nickname was Ballsy, convinced me to go over to embarrass our teammate talking to this guy. We were being silly freshmen, and we could not get over his shoes. We called him Disco Dean when we found out his name.
After the first period, incredibly, we led the game 3-1. This was astounding, as we were really not good. And Dartmouth was the league powerhouse at the time. Between periods in the locker room, we coaches discussed strategy, used every motivational tool in the book to keep up our intensity. Visions of another miracle on ice danced in our heads, and we raced out of the locker room to seize our destiny. We lost the game 11-3. My memory is that Dartmouth's number 3, a strong, talented forward, was all over the ice. I think she scored 6 goals. She was also the one I thought was kind of cute.
I was number 3. I definitely did not score 6 goals. I don't even remember the final score. I do remember getting chewed out by my coach in the locker room between periods. He went around the room, one by one, tearing us apart individually about what we were doing wrong. While Coach Crow has had an enormous impact on my coaching career, that's a tactic I haven't pulled out yet.
Now it's the summer of 1990. I'm coaching at the Dartmouth Elite Hockey Camp in Hanover, New Hampshire, and late at night, some of the coaches and counselors, along with some of the Dartmouth players, play pickup games in the Dartmouth arena. The crack of stick and puck echoing around the empty seats, along with our occasional shouts calling for a pass. One night, midway through the game, I find myself on the bench between shifts, with just one other player. I don't recognize her in her hockey gear as one of the counselors, so gathering all my talents as a conversationalist, I open with, you play for Dartmouth? So there's a scene in the movie The Terminator when Arnold Schwarzenegger, as the Terminator, does this really slow scan of the police station right before he says, "I'll be back." That was her reaction. Yes, was all the response I got. It sounded a lot like Arnold, too. If you haven't guessed, turns out that was number 3, a little older, apparently a little angrier, but still, there was something about her.
Coach made us play every night at camp. It was my sophomore summer, a time when Dartmouth students stay on campus and take classes. I had work and I just wanted to relax. But instead, Coach was up in the press box watching how we competed in the pickup game with the guys. I wasn't interested in chit-chat, but I remember the moment. I was on the bench. Mr. Sharps came for a change. He asked me his question. and then someone came to the bench and I hopped on the ice. I have no idea who was on our team that night, really no memory of the game. But that snapshot of our one interaction that summer remains in my mind. And yes, while we were mature and now in our sophomore summer, I'm sure we still made the occasional Disco Dean reference.
1991, early in my teaching and coaching career. It was late winter, and I brought one of my students to the Ivy League Women's Hockey Championships in Ithaca, New York. She was being recruited by some of the schools. Again, I remember virtually nothing about the tournament itself, but I do remember lingering outside the arena after the game, speaking to people I knew while my students spoke to coaches. People took photographs, talked in groups, said goodbyes. It was the end of the season. At one point, I remember vaguely wandering near the Dartmouth team bus. Truth be told, I had forgotten about number 3, but of course, she must have been right there somewhere.
I was. I have a photograph of Ballsy and me. There is a shadow that falls in the front of us out of the frame. If you look closely, you can see it in the corner. Once we had the photo developed, there was no digital cameras back then, Ballsy and I laughed about how it was Disco Dean's shadow.
So now comes the part that indirectly involves some of the longer tenured faculty here at Brooks, whether they know it or not. In the summer of 1992, I coached here at Brooks at the Elite Hockey Camp, a camp that rented the facilities from the rink to the dorms to the dining hall. The dining hall was in the Frick back then, and the pool. We thought, and I apologize sincerely to anyone who lived and worked here back then, that we had the run of the campus. The man who hired me for that camp was George Crow, the Dartmouth women's hockey coach. He also brought along with him that summer his captain to work in the pro shop. Sharpen skates, work in the dorms. Just my luck. His captain was number 3. Coach Crow introduced me to her on the first day, down in the far back corner of our hockey rink. My life hasn't been the same since.
Coach had asked me and 2 teammates to work the all-boys camp. I would do anything for Coach. He always had my best interest at heart, and he always took an interest in my life. Also, he really wanted us skating at night with the guys. It was a summer job with ice time at night, pickup games with college and post-college players. I was up for it. I'd have a place to live, make some money, skate every day. I had no idea how it would change my life. On the first day, as Coach had us setting up the pro shop, one of the guys came to let Coach know he had arrived. It was Disco Dean. But I was older now. He had lost his suit and dancing shoes, and he seemed like a pretty decent guy.
In the interest of time and maybe a little censorship, here are some items about our first stint here at Brooks, which lasted only a few summers. 1, I may or may not have asked number 3 out multiple times before she said yes.
This is true. I was heading into my senior year of college. I was going to work hard and play hard. I had no interest in being attached to anyone.
2, our first date may or may not have been at China Blossom and Mad Maggie's, known back then as Treadwell's. First class, all the way.
I said yes because I was a college student living on pro shop wages. He made the big bucks as a coach, and I decided I couldn't pass up a free meal.
3, we may or may not have gone swimming in the lake late at night. This was before we knew of the rule against it, of course.
No comment.
4, I may or may not have pursued number 3 for the rest of the summer, making use of flowers and terribly written love letters, none of which have survived, I assure you, before she thought, well, I guess I'm not sure what she thought.
I thought, I need some real food. This dining hall food's killing me. But he was persistent, and as I got to know him, I came to know who he really was. And he wasn't so bad.
And now comes the fast forward part. We dated for 2.5 years. During which, Mrs. Sharps graduated from college. We left Brooks far behind in the rearview mirror, or so we thought. We both began our coaching and teaching careers at different schools. We traveled long distances to visit each other. I once set her kitchen on fire. Bill Clinton became president. Kurt Cobain died. We fought, made up, and fell in love like people do. I asked her to marry me one night in the autumn of 1993 after she drove up from Boston to New Hampshire, where I taught and coached at boarding school. I may or may not have been on dorm duty the night I proposed.
He was. His dorm prefects and hockey captains were the first ones to know we had gotten engaged. There were no cell phones back then, and it wasn't easy to spread news.
First class, all the way. I just wanted you to know what you were getting into.
Fast forward again. Through the first 8 years of being married, we traveled, coached and taught, learned from each other, went through happy times and tragedy. We tried to figure out who we were. We watched Friends long before Netflix. We formed our shared worldview. We left jobs and homes, moved, lost family members, made friends, lost friends. We lived life. And then this happened.
I won't bore you with cliches and lessons about parenthood you have no way of empathizing with today, and you shouldn't. But let me just say this. In my classes, when we talk about fiction, we talk about epiphany, that sudden, instant realization that changes the way you live your life forever, and how including epiphanies in fictional stories for characters many times doesn't work. Because how many times in real life do we really have epiphanies? Well, parenthood is one of those times. It's nearly impossible to describe. But two things jump to mind about that moment when you become a parent. The colors of the world grow more vivid and brilliant, while at the same time, the world becomes blurry and indistinct. Second, you immediately understand how easily you would sacrifice yourself to save someone else's life.
The rest of the details after that add up to Taylor's story and her younger brothers. We'll let them tell it, or not, when they feel it's time. But just so you know, this was taken after 3 chocolate milks, and it was taken on the same day as this, and that became this, then this,
and eventually, one of the most meaningful photos in my life. This was taken before the very first game Taylor played with Mrs. Sharps as a coach, in the rink where her parents really met for the first time. Why is that significant? Because what this talk is really about is this. Other people's lives, for better or worse, become permanently intertwined with yours. Sometimes the intersection is fleeting, a quick interaction on the street, for instance, and then you never see that person again. But that meeting will always exist, minor as it might be. Or it could be a shadow in a photograph, or a chance meeting during a pickup hockey game, and that could mean everything. For example, this is 2005. These 2 young women came into our lives for what could have been just a brief period of time, playing hockey for Mrs. Sharps. Yet today, they remain tremendous influences on who we are and strive to be. And they have played a huge role in Taylor's and JP's upbringing. You might recognize the woman on the left. Mrs. Sharps has coached countless hockey players in her career, hundreds who have gone on to play college hockey, and some who have played and still play at the national team level.
I've coached for 27 years, preparing young women to play sports at the college level and beyond. But more importantly, preparing them for all that the world will throw at them. Preparing them to be strong and outspoken adults in this world. I'm proud of the role models they've become in athletics and as professionals and as humans. I'm really proud to count T among that long line of women. They have made me a better coach, parent, family member, and person. In a way, they have all, even the ones that came long before Taylor was born, made a mark on our family.
These fleeting encounters can be significant and long-lasting. Appreciate them. In 2003, we worked at another school with an incredible man who tragically passed away after only a few months, without warning, far too soon. I once relayed the details of that story in a chapel talk like this. Probably still available if you want to look it up.
This man's time in our lives, brief though it was, and to be honest, his death as well, contributed greatly to how we have grown as a couple, as parents, as friends, and as colleagues. When he was alive, Larry emphasized living graciously, putting others before yourself, and strength of character.
In the wake of his passing, after just a short time with him, we were fortunate enough to develop enduring relationships with his wife and sons, two of whom played lacrosse for me, and they've become family to us, to Taylor and to her brother. We still have posted in our house his 10 traits and behaviors for gracious living. Never underestimate these chance encounters. Appreciate the impact a brief conversation can have on your thoughts and actions. Those around you are not just extras in the movie of your life. They have profound and meaningful lives of their own. And if you open yourself to those relationships, really listen to what others have to say, maybe say yes to a date to China Blossom, you never know what might happen. Maybe this could happen. Thank you.